An elderly gentleman faced mockery from a haughty traveler, only to discover that the man before him was none other than Clint Eastwood. The ending will leave you in awe. The boarding gate for the early morning flight from Phoenix to Los Angeles buzzed with a lively energy, as travelers moved about, each with their own tale to tell. The passengers moved forward, their faces a tapestry woven with threads of fatigue and determination, each one clutching their carry-ons and coffee cups as they navigated the path ahead. The atmosphere was a blend of sophistication and subtlety, reflecting the elite nature of the first-class accommodation group. Among them stood a man, remarkable not just for his polished leather shoes that shone brightly beneath the terminal's fluorescent lights, but also for the way he carried himself, radiating an undeniable aura of superiority that effortlessly drew the gaze of those around him. In the midst of his 40s, this man seemed to have dedicated his life to climbing the corporate ladders, gathering accolades along the way, all while never pausing to ponder the significance of his place at the top. He was not there just to take flight. He made his presence known to assert his dominance, even in the company of unfamiliar faces. With a casual glance, he surveyed the passengers around him, a hint of indifference coloring his expression as he made his way to the gate, his leather briefcase swaying in harmonious sync with his stride. Settling comfortably into his first-class berth, he began to peruse emails on his tablet, all the while observing as other passengers made their way aboard. In that instant, his gaze fell upon the elderly man who was making his way down the aisle, a small sack clutched in his hand, each step a testament to his journey. The man's attire fell short of the expectations for first class, at least in the eyes of the discerning businessman. His outfit was rounded off with a pair of well-worn loafers, a checkered shirt, and a light brown jacket. He exuded a serene presence, as though he had traversed the tapestry of existence, untouched by the fleeting concerns of the moment, even as time flowed on. The elderly man glided with a serene grace, finding his seat with an effortless ease that spoke of a lifetime of stories untold. With a subtle flick, he straightened his jacket, carefully tucked his bag beneath the seat ahead, and leaned back, his eyes drifting to the world outside the window. To most, he might have seemed ordinary, embodying a sense of simplicity and humility. Yet, the industrialist viewed him as an anomaly. The younger man cast a fleeting glance at him before shifting his focus to the flight attendant, who was helping several passengers find their seats. He leaned in slightly, a mischievous smile playing on his lips, ensuring the older man caught every word. With a mocking grin, he remarked, "It seems that first class has lost its former exclusivity." A ripple of attention swept through the nearby passengers, their expressions shifting ever so slightly in response. Yet, the old man held on to his calm demeanor. He cast a fleeting look at the executive, noting a subtle, almost undetectable smile playing on his lips before turning his gaze back to the window. The merchant's brow furrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face as silence lingered in the air. Yet, he continued inquiring, "What is the occasion? Were they handing out charity enhancements today?" This time, his tone cut through the air, sharp and laced with scorn. Though the elder man felt the allure, he chose to resist the temptation to bite. He simply fastened his seatbelt and kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The businessman's arrogance swelled, his silence ringing louder than any words he might have uttered. The businessman reclined in his seat, a satisfied smile playing on his lips after his attempt at humor, while the flight attendants began their meticulous pre-flight inspections. Yet, the elder man's calm presence started to stir unease within him as the plane began to move along the runway. The stillness was merely one of the challenges. In a world where the superficial reigned supreme, the unwavering sense of self and tranquil confidence stood as a striking contrast, almost as if they belonged to a different realm altogether. Yet, the merchant clung to it fiercely, refusing to let it go. Unbeknownst to him, the journey was merely beginning to unfold. It was a lesson etched in his memory, one that would linger long after the moment had passed. The cabin embraced a comforting cadence as the plane soared to its cruising altitude. The atmosphere buzzed softly with the whispers of dialogue, the fluttering of pages, and the sporadic chime of a call button. The businessman, positioned merely a row apart from the elder man, found himself unable to let go of the conversation. The elder man's serene presence, his quiet resistance to involvement, and the air of mystery surrounding him all felt like a riddle, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. With one leg crossed over the other, he leaned into the aisle, his eyes fixed on the man who remained transfixed by the view outside the window. The businessman's lips twisted into a mocking grin as he made up his mind to forge ahead. My curiosity piqued. His words reached the ears of several nearby travelers. What inspires someone like you to embark on the journey of a first-year course? A remarkable stroke of luck with a lottery win? Or perhaps you've come to reflect on those cherished times when planes soared through the skies, their propellers spinning with a nostalgic grace? A handful of passengers cast furtive glances at one another, their unease palpable, yet none chose to step in. The older man paused, allowing the silence to stretch as he drew in a deliberate breath, then shifted his gaze toward the businessman with a thoughtful air. Their eyes locked for a fleeting moment. The elder man's gaze held steady and calm, as though he were weighing the motives of the younger man before him. His expression held steady, a calm facade, as he pivoted back to the window, silence enveloping him like a shroud. The businessman's confidence swelled, fueled by the silence that surrounded him. He leaned back in his seat, raising his voice, each word laced with a playful sneer. There isn't much to delve into, is there? Perhaps you would enjoy reflecting on the time before smartphones and Wi-Fi changed our lives. With a soft chuckle, he reveled in the notion that he had triumphed over the fanciful battle he had conjured in his mind. Once again, the old soul chose to remain quiet. With a meticulous folding of his hands in his lap and a careful adjustment of the cuff of his tan jacket, he sent a clear signal that seemed to whisper, "You are not worth my time." The passengers nearby shifted in their seats, sensing the unspoken tension in the air. A young couple sat across the aisle, their voices low as they exchanged whispers, glancing furtively at the older man. Meanwhile, a woman in her 50s regarded the businessman with a disapproving gaze. Amidst the rising tension in the cabin, a palpable silence hung in the air, as if everyone was waiting for the storm to break, yet no one dared to step in and alter the course of events. The businessman, oblivious to the turmoil he was causing, glanced over at a man seated across the aisle, a fellow professional clad in a meticulously pressed suit. He started to motion towards the older gentleman. Many expressed dissatisfaction with progress, yet I find it hard to understand the yearning to return to a bygone time. In a world devoid of innovation, technology, and the presence of mobile phones, we find ourselves in a realm untouched by the rapid pace of modern life. What was their secret to surviving through that time? The person across the aisle let out a nervous laugh, a clear sign of his reluctance to partake in any dialogue. Yet, the businessman seemed oblivious or perhaps indifferent to the situation at hand. He went on, "They often reminisce about how things used to be, but it's merely a longing for the past. Once upon a time, the universe began its grand journey of evolution. Despite their claims, the circumstances have taken a turn for the better." As the flight attendant glided down the aisle, the beverage tray followed her like a faithful companion, ready to serve the eager passengers. Her professional demeanor carried a hint of tension. With a gentle grace, she made her way to the row where the elderly man sat and settled beside him. With a gentle and respectful tone, she inquired, "Mr. Eastwood, would you prefer coffee or tea?" The businessman found himself momentarily frozen at the sound of her voice. The name hit him with the force of a thunderclap, causing his tablet to tumble from his grasp and rest upon his lap. Who is this figure known as Eastwood? A wave of incredulity swept through him, igniting a flurry of thoughts in his mind. Could it be imagined? The elderly man turned to the flight attendant, offering her a warm and respectful smile. "I would like a black coffee," he said, his voice steady and calm, as if weaving a tale of simplicity and clarity. The businessman's jaw tightened as he sifted through the name, voice, and image that began to crystallize in his mind. Clint Eastwood, the iconic figure whose presence commanded attention in every setting, is truly the embodiment of Clint Eastwood. And there he was, seated merely a row apart, quietly bearing the weight of the businessman's disdain. A hush fell over the cabin as a wave of whispers began to weave through the air, each passenger catching wind of the unfolding revelation. Could that really be him? A woman leaned in and murmured softly to her partner. Another passenger whispered with a thrill, "I think it's Clint Eastwood." The businessman's face drained of color as the truth settled in. The person he had been jesting about was far more than just an ordinary elderly traveler. He was a luminary of the silver screen, a character synonymous with sagacity, strength, and unwavering spirit. In that moment, the weight of his mistake crashed down upon him, leaving him utterly speechless. Yet, his embarrassment did not end with this revelation. It was merely the dawn of a tale that would reveal itself before the eyes of the entire cabin. The merchant found himself frozen in place, the weight of recognition pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. Clint Eastwood. He struggled to align the legendary persona he had always admired with the unassuming man in a tan jacket who silently endured his jabs, the name resonating in his thoughts. He cast another look at Eastwood, who was now leisurely sipping his coffee, appearing either oblivious or entirely unfazed by the wave of whispers flowing through the cabin. As the truth dawned upon the growing crowd of passengers, their whispers swelled, drawing them closer together in shared intrigue. Is that indeed Clint Eastwood? A woman sitting a few rows behind her husband shared her excitement with him. Indeed, he affirmed, tilting his head to capture a broader view of the situation. The merchant heard the words, and a flush of heat spread across his ears. He sank a little deeper into his seat, longing to melt into the soft embrace of the cushions. His humiliation deepened with the hushed exchanges that enveloped him, each whisper acting as a tiny beacon that highlighted his misstep. With a firm grip on the armrests, his thoughts raced like a whirlwind in his mind. How could it be that I did not recognize him? How could I have been so unsuspecting? Yet, it was not only because he couldn't recognize Eastwood. It was the way he had spoken to him, derisive, patronizing, and scornful. He had regarded him as a forgotten artifact from days gone by, and the dawning awareness of his mistake hit him like a sudden blow to the gut. At long last, he found the courage to share his words. He leaned slightly forward in his seat and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Eastwood?" His voice now carried a quiet hesitation, a sharp departure from the earlier boisterous and arrogant bravado. Eastwood's intense gaze locked onto the businessman, his head turning with deliberate slowness. It bore a certain intensity, neither hostile nor welcoming. The gaze was a powerful force, stopping people in their tracks, radiating the wisdom and quiet strength of someone who had seen and experienced far more than most could ever comprehend. With a calm demeanor, Eastwood responded, his voice steady and unembellished. The industrialist endeavored to voice his thoughts, yet his throat betrayed him, silencing his intentions. What was the essence of his message? Do you wish to express remorse for your confrontational actions? I regret not recognizing you. I sincerely regret making you feel unwelcome in this space. Everything seemed to fall short. He stumbled over his words, letting them drift away awkwardly, and I remained oblivious to it all. Eastwood raised an eyebrow, a glimmer of expectation dancing in his gaze. The businessman felt a growing tension, his silence deepening the discomfort within him. The businessman, with a voice that barely rose above a whisper, offered his apology, expressing that it was never his intention to cause you any offense. I had no knowledge of who you were. For the first time, a glimmer of amusement danced across Eastwood's expression. With a gentle motion, he set his coffee cup upon the tray table before him, leaning back ever so slightly in his seat, as if preparing for a moment of reflection. "And if I were not the person you think I am?" he asked, his tone steady yet sharp. The merchant paused, his eyes widening in surprise as he blinked in disbelief. "Could you clarify what you mean?" With a steady gaze, Eastwood tilted his head, embodying a sense of determination. "Would the way you spoke to me be fitting if I were just a regular person in a tartan shirt?" The businessman's lips moved in a silent dance, yet no sound escaped them. The inquiry hit him with an intensity that surpassed his assumptions, and for a fleeting moment, he found himself rooted in his seat, staring at the person he had so haughtily overlooked. The whispers of the cabin faded, drawing the passengers closer to the unfolding dialogue. Even the flight attendants, busy with their duties of weaving through the aisles, momentarily paused, their attention drawn to Eastwood and the businessman. The businessman's countenance was drenched in a deep crimson of shame as he gulped down his discomfort with a heavy swallow. He finally yielded, his voice a mere whisper, "I suppose not." Eastwood offered a subtle, almost undetectable nod, as though he had foreseen this reply from the very beginning. With a silent resolve, he lifted his coffee cup and shifted his gaze back to the window, a clear signal that the dialogue had reached its conclusion for him. Yet, for the industrialist, the tale was just beginning. The lesson Eastwood had just shared lingered in the atmosphere, delivered with a calmness and clarity that resonated more profoundly than any shout or furious reply, leaving an undeniable weight in its wake. The businessman sat in his seat, his mind a tempest of thoughts swirling around him. Clint Eastwood's words served as a mirror, casting back his arrogance and preconceived notions for him to see. He longed to extend an apology once again, yet the confidence he had once shown had now slipped away. He struggled to uncover the right words to mend the damage done. He finally leaned forward once more, his voice soft and hesitant, after what seemed like an endless stretch of time. "Mr. Eastwood, I find it necessary to extend my sincerest apologies to you." "I was not attempting to," Eastwood interjected, raising his hand to halt the flow of words, yet his demeanor held steady and calm. His tone was steady and resolute, as he conveyed that no explanation was necessary. "What has been finished is now finished. Yet, a valuable lesson awaits, if you are open to discovering it." The businessman's eyes sparkled with urgency as he nodded fervently, eager to prove his worth. The cabin held an eerie stillness, a palpable tension in the air, as if everyone was waiting with bated breath for Clint Eastwood's next words. Eastwood's fingers danced around his coffee cup, a gentle embrace, as he reclined just a bit, savoring the moment. He started, his voice rich with the depth of years gone by. "People often think that respect is something you gain by being someone significant, someone adorned with a title or a reputation. True reverence flows not from the identity of another, but from the essence of who you are." The breath of life was snatched from the businessman. He parted his lips to speak, yet silence enveloped him. Eastwood's words hit him squarely in the chest, the straightforwardness of the truth cutting through all the excuses he had been crafting. Eastwood maintained a steady focus as he continued, "You see, respect is unwavering. It is not something that is handed out based on how someone looks, what they wear, or if we know their name. Your demeanor and how you interact with others matter, even if you think no one is watching." The businessman felt a wave of embarrassment sweep across his face. He took great pride in his journey as a self-made individual, crafting a life defined by success and status. Yet, here he stood, receiving guidance on the very essence of decency from someone he had so thoughtlessly overlooked. Eastwood savored his coffee, taking a moment to relish the warmth before placing it back on the tray table. "Through my journey, I've come to understand that people often leap to conclusions with remarkable speed. From the very first glance, they feel as though they have unraveled the essence of another soul. Yet, those assumptions?" He gave a subtle nod of his head. "They unveil deeper truths about the one who crafted them rather than the subject they portray." The businessman felt a sudden dryness in his throat as he struggled to swallow a lump that had formed within him. Though he yearned to share his thoughts, the weight of his own regret held him back from finding the words. Eastwood's voice took on a gentler quality as he remarked, "I share this not to bring you discomfort. As I share this insight, I invite you to reflect on it the next time you find yourself observing another and weighing their worth against your own." In the cabin, a fleeting moment of complete stillness enveloped the air. The businessman sat still, his eyes locked on Eastwood, who had shifted his attention back to the window, maintaining an air of calmness that was unshakable. The mind of the businessman was a whirlwind of restless thoughts and emotions. He pondered the many moments when he had overlooked the people around him, coworkers, strangers, and even friends, simply because they did not fit into his narrow view of success or significance. How many chances had he overlooked to truly engage and understand due to his own pride? As he sat there, grappling with the burden of his own choices, a profound understanding washed over him. Eastwood's words were not just a scolding, they were a call to transformation. The industrialist sat in silence during the flight, his thoughts swirling with deep reflection and a sense of remorse. The soft whispers around him felt like echoes from another world, a gentle hum that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing in his thoughts. Clint Eastwood's words echoed in his mind, each phrase growing more powerful as he practiced it. "Respect flows not from the identity of another, but from the essence of who you are." He cast another glance at Eastwood, who remained in his seat, staring out the window as if the entire exchange were but a fleeting moment in the tapestry of his long and illustrious life. His expression held no trace of anger or lingering annoyance. The businessman found himself in solitude, lost in thought, as though the wisdom had been shared and the elder had quietly departed. Furthermore, those thoughts remained steadfast. The businessman found himself reflecting on this encounter, as well as other moments in his life where he had acted too quickly and overlooked the deeper truths. He pondered the apprentice he had once belittled for suggesting an idea he thought was too straightforward to grasp. A similar idea was attributed to another individual, yet it evolved into a fundamental pillar of the company's triumphs in the months that followed. He pondered the janitor at his office, a figure he had overlooked until that fateful day when the man stepped in to help him retrieve the scattered documents after his tumble in the hallway. He reflected on the thoughts of colleagues he dismissed, neighbors whose names eluded him, and strangers whose tales held no allure for him. He felt the growing burden of his arrogance and assumptions in every encounter, each memory deepening the heaviness in his chest. He had woven a life around the belief that his own achievements and intellect granted him the right to judge others through the lens of his skewed criteria, allowing him to cast a condescending gaze upon them. Yet, that enchantment was shattered by Eastwood's calm words. The businessman shifted uneasily in his seat. He had never known the sensation of feeling small in the grand tapestry of life. He reveled in his knack for captivating an audience and steering the narrative with confidence. Yet, he stood there, humbled by a man who had simply shared the truth, without argument or raised voice. Out of the blue, a vivid recollection from his early years emerged. He remembered his father, a man of discipline and justice, imparting wisdom with a steady voice. "Son, how you treat those who cannot help you reveals more about your character than anything else." In his youthful arrogance, he had brushed off those words, too confident to see their significance in his life. In that moment, seated in first class, the burden of his actions loomed large, making those words resonate with an intensity he had never felt before. He took note of the hushed reverence that seemed to envelop Eastwood as he surveyed the cabin. Once absorbed in their screens, the passengers now found themselves casting furtive looks and sharing hushed conversations, as if drawn into an unfolding tale around them. Yet, it seemed that Eastwood was either oblivious to the unfolding events or simply chose to remain unaffected by them. His quiet assurance was genuine, not an act. It was never about seeking approval or demanding attention. It was just the essence of who he was. The businessman felt a fleeting pang of envy, not for Eastwood's fame or achievements, but for his profound self-awareness. He discovered that his confidence had always been tied to the things around him, his paycheck, his position, and the belongings he owned. Who did he become when those items were no longer present? Would he maintain his stature and earn the respect he sought, or would he crumble beneath the weight of his own doubts? In a sudden moment of clarity, he became acutely aware of how tightly his fingers were clutching the armrests. His palms glistened with sweat, and his knuckles stood out starkly, pale as bone. He slowly loosened his hold and let out a long, deep breath. He found himself unable to take back his words to Eastwood, nor could he wipe away the sting of this journey. Yet, a course of action lay before him. He possessed the remarkable ability to gather wisdom. The industrialist remained quiet for the rest of the flight, his mind swirling with the weight of Eastwood's words. He pondered the kind of person he wished to become, someone who earned respect, not by means of riches or power, but through genuine humility and kindness. He found himself at a crossroads, pondering if the hour had grown too late for transformation, yet deep within, he felt an undeniable urge to try. Yet, as it started its descent, a singular truth emerged. This was not just another journey. The moment unfolded like a chapter in a grand tale, a pivotal scene that would linger in his memory long after the wheels kissed the earth. The industrialist felt a familiar thrill as the landing gear engaged, signaling the aircraft's descent. As the cabin lights softly brightened, the flight attendants glided down the aisle, their keen eyes surveying tray tables and seat belts with meticulous care. For everyone else, it was just another ordinary landing in the grand tapestry of life. Yet, this journey unfolded in a manner far from the usual for the entrepreneur. As he gazed out the window, the majestic skyline of Los Angeles unfolded before him, a tapestry of dreams and stories waiting to be told. Usually, this scene would spark a thrill and a rush of vitality, brimming with the promise of meetings, transactions, and opportunities that lay ahead in the city. Yet today unfolded in a way that was truly unique. The skyline unfolded like a tale waiting to be told. It served as a poignant reminder of the man he once was when he stepped onto that flight, a figure who measured success by his influence and status, blind to the imperfections that lay within his character. The businessman sought to soothe the whirlwind of feelings swirling within him as the plane glided gracefully onto the runway. He inhaled deeply. The weight of Eastwood's words lingered heavily upon his chest, an unyielding presence that refused to fade. Respect transcends the identity of the individual in question. It is woven into the very fabric of who you are. Those words turned his world upside down, urging him to face the truths he had long evaded. The cabin resonated with the comforting symphony of arrival, the gentle ping of seatbelt signs extinguishing, the shuffling of travelers collecting their possessions, and the sporadic murmur of eager souls ready to step onto solid ground. The businessman's hands quivered ever so slightly as he extended them toward his briefcase, his movements deliberate and unhurried, a stark contrast to his usual briskness. His thoughts wandered far beyond the mundane details of the journey. He then watched as Clint Eastwood rose from his vantage point. The elderly gentleman picked up his humble carry-on bag and draped it over one shoulder, exuding a sense of measured tranquility. Eastwood took a moment, glancing over his shoulder as he moved toward the aisle, his focus shifting to the industrialist. The businessman felt a brief rush, reminiscent of a child caught red-handed in a moment of mischief. As he prepared to voice his thoughts, Eastwood offered a subtle, understanding smile, halting him in his tracks. It carried neither disdain nor pride. It was forgiving. Eastwood's voice was a calm river, flowing with a steady authority that had once hushed the industrialist, gently urging him to prioritize his well-being. With a deliberate turn, Eastwood made his way to the exit, leaving the industrialist enveloped in a profound sense of wonder. The merchant, in his naivety, could never have anticipated the weight carried by those simple words, uttered with neither malice nor bitterness. It was more than just a farewell. It was a beckoning to evolve, a gentle nudge from the universe. The businessman keenly watched how the other passengers looked at Eastwood as he made his way through, eventually rising and shuffling into the aisle. Gaze upon them, filled with admiration, not merely for who he was, but for the way he carried himself through the world. He did not seek adoration. He gained it through his steadfast strength and noble grace. The businessman navigated the bustling stream of travelers as they made their way through the jet bridge and into the crowded terminal. The tranquil hush of the flight was suddenly pierced by the buzz of movement and the dazzling glow of lights. Yet, the wisdom he had gained lingered in his mind as he made his way to the baggage claim. He pondered the many moments when he had evaluated others through the lens of their apparent significance, status, or outward appearance. He pondered the many chances he had let slip away to forge connections with others, all because of his own self-absorption. He pondered the kind of individual he wished to become, a person who offered respect unconditionally, not for any personal gain, but simply because it was the honorable choice to make. As he arrived at the baggage claim area, he took a moment to gather his thoughts before reaching for his phone. He found himself drawn to his emails, diving back into his work, all the while trying to push down the unsettling feelings that had been haunting him for the last few hours. Instead, he took a blank note and crafted 3 simple sentences. Attempt to capture the essence of Eastwood. Though the road before him was shrouded in doubt, one truth burned brightly within him. He could never return to who he once was. He found it challenging to fully express how profoundly that flight had shaped his life. For sometimes, the most profound lessons are not delivered through lectures or written words, but in the quiet instances where someone holds up a mirror, urging you to see your authentic self. As the businessman stepped out of the terminal and into the warm embrace of the Los Angeles sun, a long-forgotten emotion washed over him, stirring memories that had lain dormant for years, understanding and sharing the feelings of others. Hope carried with it a gentle humility. He yearned for the chance to start afresh, embracing the world with an open heart and a curious mind. If this tale struck a chord with you, think about passing it along to someone who might need a gentle nudge about the value of humility and respect. Kindly consider subscribing for more tales that inspire and provoke us to grow. What steps would you have chosen to take in his situation? Kindly share your thoughts in the remarks section below.